She didn't email, she texted. One line, no punctuation at all, like the message wasn't worth the effort of a period at the end. The seating is already finalized. There won't be room. I was in the back of my alteration shop when my phone buzzed. Between a hem and a zipper repair, fingers still holding a pin, I read the message from my daughter-in-law twice. Then I set the phone face down on the work table and stood very still. The event she was referring to was my son's induction dinner. 3 weeks from that Thursday, Spencer would be formally named a partner at Holt, Brennan & Associates, one of the most respected law firms in Chicago. I had known about the dinner since August. I had already bought a dress for it, a deep burgundy one I'd driven 40 minutes to find at the department store 2 towns over. I had tried it on 3 times in my bedroom mirror and decided it was right. Dignified, the correct length, not trying too hard. I am 64 years old. I have been a widow for 11 years. I run a small alteration shop out of a converted garage in Dayton, Ohio. The same shop I have run for 22 years, the same one that put my son through college, through law school, through the first years of his career, when his student loan payments were heavy enough to make his voice tighten whenever we talked about money. I am not a woman who takes up much space. I know how to make myself small when rooms require it. But apparently, I was still too much. I didn't call my son that night. I told myself he probably hadn't seen the message yet, that there was a misunderstanding about the seating arrangements, that his wife had sent it hastily and meant something different. I told myself a lot of comfortable things in that first hour. But I knew my daughter-in-law. Tamara did not make administrative errors. She organized her calendar in 15-minute blocks. She had, at some point in their marriage, color-coded the kitchen pantry. She had not sent a vague text by accident. She had made a choice and dressed it up as a logistical problem. I went home and looked at the burgundy dress hanging on my bedroom door. I didn't take it down, I just looked at it. On the work table in my shop, I keep a small tin I've had since Spencer was young. It's a button tin, the old kind, painted with faded flowers, the kind you find at estate sales for $2. When Spencer was 7 or 8, he used to sit on the tall stool beside me while I worked, sorting through that tin. He liked to arrange the buttons by color, then by size, then by the number of holes. He was serious about it. Deliberate. Even at 8, he approached problems as though there was a correct answer waiting if he was patient enough. He grew up to be exactly that kind of man, and somewhere along the way, I had stopped fitting into the system he had built. 2 days later, I ran into my neighbor, Doris, at the grocery store. She was in the bread aisle, reading the back of a loaf like it held important information. When she looked up and saw me, her face opened. "Are you heading to Chicago next weekend?" she asked. "I heard Spencer is being honored. That must be such a proud moment for you." I smiled and told her, yes, it was wonderful news. I didn't tell her I hadn't been invited. I didn't tell anyone. The week moved slowly. I took in a bridesmaid dress for alterations, fixed the lining on a winter coat, let out the waist on a pair of slacks for a man who apologized 3 times for needing it done. I answered the phone when my son called on Wednesday, and we talked for 11 minutes about nothing important. The weather in Chicago, whether I'd had the furnace serviced yet, what I thought about a restaurant he'd tried near their apartment. He didn't mention the dinner. I didn't either. I don't know which of us was more careful. On Thursday afternoon, I was locking up the shop early when a woman appeared at the front door. I had never met her in person, only seen her in one photograph my son had texted after a holiday gathering, standing at the edge of a group, holding a drink, looking slightly bored. She was in her early 70s, wearing a camel-colored coat and a silk scarf in a print that was loud in the best possible way. White hair, cut short, no hesitation in her step. "You're Spencer's mother," she said, not a question. I said I was. "I'm Tamara's aunt," she said, her mother's older sister. "My name is Georgina." I opened the door and let her in. She looked around the shop slowly, the dress forms, the spools of thread arranged by color on the pegboard, the old sewing machine in the corner. I kept for sentiment more than function. She didn't say anything dismissive. She said, "This place smells like my grandmother's house." We sat in the 2 chairs I keep near the fitting room, the ones upholstered in a green fabric that was fashionable in 1987 and has apparently become fashionable again. I offered her water from the small refrigerator under the counter. She took it. I also wasn't invited, she said, without preamble. I looked at her. I received a very polite phone call, she said, from Tamara herself. She explained that the dinner was corporate in nature and that the guest list had been carefully curated. Georgina took a slow sip of water, carefully curated, as if her family is an exhibit. She set the cup down. She wasn't wrong about my tendency to say things plainly, but she was wrong about how to handle it. Why did she exclude you? I asked. Because I say true things out loud, and because I once told her senior partner's wife that her centerpiece looked like a funeral arrangement. I wasn't wrong, but I understand her concern. She paused. And you? What was her reason? She said the seating was finalized, that there wasn't room. Georgina looked at me steadily. For his mother. Yes. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, I want to go to that dinner. I've already confirmed with the hotel that additional tickets are available at the door. It's a formal gala, not a private seated event. Tamara made it sound more exclusive than it is. She adjusted the scarf at her neck. I want to go, and I'd like you to come with me. I didn't answer. Think on it, she said, standing. I'll be outside the Whitmore Hotel on Saturday evening at 6:30. I'll be wearing something green. She left before I could respond. I didn't sleep well that week. I'd make tea and stand at the kitchen window, looking at the dark yard. I kept thinking about Spencer at 18, the night before he left for college, sitting at the kitchen table at 11 p.m., with a bowl of cereal he wasn't eating, just needing somewhere to be. I had sat down across from him without asking why, and we'd stayed there for an hour, not talking much. That was us at our best. Quiet company. When had that changed? I thought about Tamara, too. Not with anger, not exactly. She was not a cruel person. She was a person who had decided what her life was supposed to look like and worked backward from that image, trimming whatever didn't fit the frame. I had watched it happening gradually over the years. The way conversations about family events had shifted from invitations to announcements. The way dinners at their apartment had become occasions I was informed about, rather than included in planning. Small adjustments, each one reasonable on its own, until one day I looked up and realized I was standing at the edge of my own son's life, waiting to be let in. On Friday evening, I took the burgundy dress off the hanger. I put it on. I stood in front of the mirror for a long time. My hands are the hands of someone who has worked with them for 40 years. The knuckles are larger than they used to be. There is a small scar on my right index finger from a rotary cutter, a souvenir from 1991. I don't usually notice these things about myself. I noticed them that night. I took the dress off. I hung it back up carefully, smoothed the fabric at the shoulders. But I didn't put it away. Saturday morning, I woke at 6. I showered slowly, washed my hair, took my time. I pinned it back the way I do for occasions that matter, with the small pearl clip I've had since my wedding. I put on a little mascara, just enough. I stepped into the burgundy dress. It fit exactly right. At 6:15, I picked up my good black coat, the one with the velvet collar, and the small evening bag I hadn't used since my husband's retirement dinner 13 years ago. The clasp still worked. At 6:20, I walked out to the car. The drive to Chicago was 3.5 hours. I hadn't told Georgina I was coming. I simply drove. I pulled into the Whitmore Hotel Circular Drive at 28 minutes past 6, and there she was, standing just outside the entrance in a forest green dress that had no business being as elegant as it was, with amber beads at her throat and a composure that made the whole hotel entrance look like she had arranged it. When she saw my car, she didn't look surprised. She looked satisfied. We walked in together. The Whitmore Ballroom was the kind of room that tells you immediately it was not designed for people like me. 30-foot ceilings, chandeliers like frozen waterfalls, tables set with crystal that caught the light and threw it in every direction. It smelled of white flowers and something expensive I couldn't name. The guests were in clusters near the open bar, lawyers and their partners, clients, people who wore the right watches without thinking about them. Everyone was composed in that practiced way that comes from years of knowing exactly which rooms you belong in. We were not supposed to be in this one. I felt it the moment we stepped through the door, a current of recognition passing through the nearest cluster of guests. A woman in a silver dress glanced at Georgina, then at me, the way people do when they're trying to place you without being caught looking. "Chin up," Georgina said quietly. "Don't explain yourself with your posture." We moved into the room. I saw my son before he saw me. He was standing near the far end of the bar with two men in suits, laughing at something, relaxed in a way I hadn't seen in years. He looked like the man he had worked very hard to become. He looked like he had arrived. Then he turned and he saw me. The laugh didn't fall away all at once. It faded slowly, like a light on a dimmer, gradual enough that the men beside him didn't notice. But I noticed. I have been reading my son's face since he was 3 days old. Tamara saw me almost at the same moment. Her expression was different from his. Not shock, more like someone who has opened a door and found the wrong weather behind it. She came to us first. Spencer followed half a step behind. "This is a private corporate event," she said. Her voice was very quiet, very controlled. "We purchased tickets at the door," Georgina said pleasantly. "The hotel confirmed availability when I called earlier this week." Tamara looked at her aunt for a long moment, then at me. "I think we should speak privately." "Of course," I said. "But I should be clear, I'm not leaving. If you ask the hotel to escort us out, that's a choice you can make. But I won't walk out on my own." Her jaw tightened. She nodded once and turned back into the crowd. Spencer looked at me a second longer than necessary. Something complicated moving across his face, and then followed her. Georgina reached over and straightened the collar of my coat. "Well done," she said. We found a table near the side of the room. No name cards waited for us. No seats reserved. We made our own. The couple nearby were from Spencer's firm, younger, polite in the cautious way of people who aren't sure what they're witnessing. Dinner progressed with the choreography these events always have. Cocktails, salads, the formal presentation. When Spencer's name was called, he walked to the podium and spoke about the firm, about mentorship, about the cases that had shaped him. He was measured and excellent, and I felt every word land somewhere deep. He did not look at our table during the speech. But he didn't look away from it entirely either. Tamara spoke later, for a charity initiative tied to the evening. She was at ease with a microphone, completely, unnervingly at ease. She thanked the firm's families, the partners' spouses, everyone who had contributed to building something lasting. She said, "Tonight is about intention, about creating something deliberate, something that truly reflects who we've chosen to become." I looked down at the tablecloth and said nothing. Georgina leaned slightly toward me. "She rehearses in front of the bathroom mirror," she murmured. "I've witnessed it." I pressed my lips together to keep from smiling. It was the boy who shifted something in me. He was 15, maybe 16, dressed for the occasion under clear protest, clip-on tie slightly askew, jacket a size too large at the shoulders. He had been hovering near the dessert table for some time before he eventually drifted toward our side of the room. He stopped at Georgina's chair first. "Hi, Aunt Georgie," he said. She looked him over. "You're taller." "It's been 4 months. Sit down if you want." He did, folding his long limbs into the empty chair beside her. He was Georgina's step-grandson, she explained later, her late husband's daughter's boy, who had come with a family friend who was also a firm client. He looked at me directly. Teenagers either avoid your eyes or hold them without knowing they're being forward. He was the second kind. "Are you related to the guy who just made partner?" he asked. "I'm his mother," I said. He nodded seriously. "My mom says making partner is like finishing a marathon, except in a suit." "That's about right." He looked around the room, then back at me. "Are you two supposed to be here?" he asked. "My mom said something seemed off when she saw you come in." Georgina made a small sound. "We're dealing with the same thing we've been dealing with for some time," she said. "We've simply stopped pretending we don't notice." The boy looked at me for a moment. He had the clear, uncomplicated eyes of someone who hadn't yet learned to look away to be polite. "For what it's worth," he said, "you look like you're supposed to be here. More than most people in this room, actually." He left shortly after, drifting back into the party. But something about the plainness of what he said stayed with me. Not because it was profound, but because it was accurate and he'd offered it without agenda. The way you offer someone a glass of water because you noticed they were thirsty. Spencer came to our table near the end of the evening. He came alone. He sat down in the chair the boy had left, loosened his tie a quarter inch, a habit he'd had since high school, the first concession he made when he was tired, and said nothing for a moment. "I didn't know she'd contacted you," he said. "The message came from her number," I said. "She told me you decided the drive was too much, that you weren't up for it." I looked at him. 3.5 hours. I've made longer trips for worse reasons. He was quiet. Then I should have called to confirm. "Yes," I said, "you should have." Spencer turned the cufflink on his left wrist, the same way he used to fidget with his watch band in high school when something was working itself out in his head. "I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say it tonight," I told him. "But I want you to understand something. I didn't come here to make a point. I came because I am your mother. I was awake the night before every exam that scared you. I drove to Columbus when your car broke down in your second year. I altered your first good suit in my shop so it would hang correctly, because you couldn't afford a tailor yet. I am part of the story that got you to this room, and I won't be quietly edited out of your life because I don't fit a particular image." He didn't look away. He held what I'd said, the way someone holds something they're deciding the weight of. "I know," he said. "Good." He sat a moment longer, then stood. "Drive safe going home," he said. He touched my shoulder briefly, the way he used to passing me in the hallway when he was small, a gesture so habitual he probably didn't know he still did it. And then he walked back into the room. Georgina was quiet for a moment. "That's a start," she said. "It's something," I agreed. The drive home was long and dark, the highway thinning as the hours deepened. I didn't put on the radio. I drove and let the mile markers pass and thought about the difference between who I had been that morning and who I seemed to be now. I wasn't sure I felt victorious. I felt real. That was different, and it was enough. When I got home, I changed out of the burgundy dress and hung it back carefully. Not tucked away, hung at the front of the closet where I could see it. I made tea and sat at the kitchen table. I looked at the button tin on the counter. Spencer's name wasn't written on it anywhere, but his fingerprints were all over it. The way children leave impressions on things they never think about again. Tamara came to my house 2 days later. She didn't text first. She knocked on the shop door, found it closed, and came around to the house entrance. I saw her through the kitchen window before she knocked. I stood there for a moment. Then I went to the door. She didn't apologize immediately. That would have been simpler. And Tamara was not a person who chose simple when she could choose deliberate. She stood on my porch with her hands folded in front of her and said, "I knew you would come." "Then you knew more than you let on," I said. "Yes." She looked at her hands. "May I come in?" I stepped aside. She walked through the living room slowly, the way people do when they need movement to help them think. She stopped at the photograph on the shelf. Spencer at age 9, standing at my cutting table in a tiny blazer I'd made him as a joke, holding a pair of fabric scissors he had absolutely no business being near. He was grinning like he'd won something significant. "He used to talk about this shop," she said. "When we first started dating, he told me about growing up here, watching you work." He sounded proud. "And more recently?" I asked. She turned. Something had come loose in her expression. "More recently, I think I made him feel like he had to choose between the life we were building and the life he came from. That wasn't fair. To either of you." I sat down in the armchair. "Why did you really do it?" She was quiet for a long moment, looking out the window at my small yard. "Because I was afraid," she said finally. "Not of you. Of what other people would conclude. His partners know him a certain way. I didn't want someone to look at you and then look at him and start drawing lines between the two, start reducing him." She pressed her lips together. "It was wrong. I understood that the moment you walked through those doors, the way you carried yourself." She paused. "I had built an idea of what you would be, and you weren't it. You were more than it, and I didn't know what to do with that." I looked at her steadily. "I didn't go to that dinner to embarrass anyone." "I know," she said. "I went because I earned the right to be in that room." She nodded slowly. You did. We sat with that for a while. I don't know how to undo it, she said. You don't undo it, I told her. You simply do something different from here. She nodded again. It wasn't a promise. It was a beginning, which is its own kind of thing. After she left, I stood in the living room for a moment. Then I went back to the shop, unlocked the door, turned on the lights, and got back to work. There was a jacket waiting to be taken in at the shoulders, a coat that needed new buttons. I opened the tin and found a set of dark navy ones, 4-hole, just the right weight. I sat down at the machine and started. Georgina called that evening. She came to see you, she said, not a question. She did. And honest, I said, more honest than I expected. A small pause. That's her best quality, Georgina said. It surfaces when the performance stops working. Another pause. My step-grandson asked about you. He wants to know if you could show him how to sew on a button. He lost one from his school blazer, and no one at home has gotten around to fixing it. I laughed, a short, real one. Tell him to come by the shop on a Saturday. I'll tell him. He could use someone like you in his life. He already has you, I said. We're not mutually exclusive, she replied, and I could hear the smile in it. Spencer called on a Sunday 3 weeks later. Not a text, he called. We talked for 40 minutes. About a difficult case he was working through. About a restaurant near their apartment that did a pot roast, he said reminded him of mine. About the dinner, eventually. Not at length, not with performance. He said he was sorry he hadn't confirmed with me himself. I said I accepted that. We moved forward. It wasn't everything. But it was the shape of something real beginning again, and I have learned to recognize that shape and not dismiss it for being smaller than I wanted. I keep the burgundy dress at the front of my closet now, not because I am waiting for another occasion, just because I want to be able to see it and remember the night I stopped asking for permission to occupy my own space. Georgina and I have lunch on the second Tuesday of every month at a diner near her apartment that makes excellent pie and terrible coffee. We drink the coffee anyway. We talk about our children and the particular weight of loving people who sometimes forget to look back at you. We laugh more than you might expect from two women discussing difficult things. And some Saturdays, a teenage boy with a crooked tie comes into the shop and sits on the tall stool beside my cutting table. He is learning to sew. He's not very good at it yet. His tension is inconsistent and he still grips the fabric too tightly. But he is deliberate about it, patient, always looking for the correct answer, always willing to start again. He reminds me of someone. I hand him thread and tell him to try again, and outside the window the light shifts the way it does in late afternoon. And inside the shop there is the quiet, steady sound of something being carefully made whole.